Good morning. So, at some point, the silence that you stopped saying that you actually meant when you prayed, you didn't stop praying. You just started showing up at this as this version essentially that sounded a little bit more like faith than it actually felt. And so that version didn't require you to admit that you were confused or upset. But you've been waiting long enough that you're starting to wonder if you even heard God correctly at all. So you just kept showing up and you started kind of editing yourself before you came to prayer. That's what we're going to be getting into this morning. Good morning as you guys pop in. Good morning, Letty. Good morning as you guys are coming in. So there's a version of you that sounds like faith, essentially, but what you're doing is self-protecting. You're showing up, you're still talking to God, but you're not really saying the real thing that you're feeling. And I think that's because you have felt a silence from God that's been there long enough that you're not even sure if He's hearing you anymore. And you kind of start to question the relationship. That was Moses at the end of Exodus 5. He said what he really felt, and God answered him. We're going to be getting into that this morning. So good morning as you guys are popping in. Good morning, Kat. Good morning. If you guys are new here, I welcome you. Can you put that in the chat as you're coming in? We're going to be finishing we finished Exodus 5 today, but we have a part 2 within that. So if you missed yesterday, I'm going to catch you up. Come on in and get settled in. But before we open up the text, I want to ask you something. So have any of you guys ever been in a season where you kept showing up? You kept showing up to what God had actually placed in your heart, but you kept softening what you actually brought to Him. Like, if you brought that real version of yourself, it felt like too much, so you just edited it. You fixed it. You didn't really say what was on your heart. Does that sound like you? If that is you, you could put a yes in the comments. If it's not you, put no. But I asked that very intentionally because that is a piece of where we're going to be going today. Okay? So have you ever been in a season where you kept showing up to what God called you to? But when you brought yourself in prayer, it wasn't that full version of yourself. Does that sound like any of you guys? You kind of make your prayer sound a little bit more polished. You don't really bring that full version to yourself, of yourself to Him. If that's you, put a Y in the comments. But if you are always vulnerable, put a no. I would say there was a part of me that in the beginning I felt like I just always had to come to prayer with praise and gratitude. And I felt like it was wrong of me if I was ever upset with Him. So I started making sure that my prayers were always ones of gratitude. But sometimes deep down, I was kind of upset with Him. Okay? I feel like I felt that most when I walked into something and it didn't match what He had told me. It kind of felt like He went silent. And the thing about silence, after we walk in obedience, the thing that it does that I feel like nobody really talks about is it doesn't just make you wait, it makes you kind of edit yourself. Because you're coming into this version of obedience where you are so certain that you just heard what God told you to do, and then what follows doesn't match that, and you sit there and you're confused, and you're coming to prayer, and you're praying, and you're saying, your typical prayer, you're thanking Him, you're doing all of these things, but underneath that, you have this feeling of like, God, what's going on? But you don't bring that fully. That's what I'm talking about. Have any of you guys ever done that? Like you came into whatever you stepped into already carrying this question about whether you were the right person for it, but maybe you didn't ask God. Moses spent 2 full chapters telling God why he was the wrong choice, and then he went anyway. Right? He obeyed anyway. And the first thing that came back, it wasn't confirmation. It was a harder workload for the Israelites, and a door closed and people blamed him for the outcome. And the silence that he experienced, that didn't feel neutral after that. It felt like an answer to the question for something that he felt like was already true. That's the layer of Exodus that we're going into this morning, because we yesterday read all of Exodus, but I wanted to go deeper into it. Okay, so how many of you guys have felt that? You stepped into obedience. It didn't match what you thought what God had just told you. It was kind of like a complete contradiction. And then you're just left with silence. And there's a piece of you that is questioning, like, God, I told you I wasn't the person in the first place. And then what happens after feels like confirmation. Have you guys ever experienced that? But you remain faithful, right? You probably remained faithful and you trusted in him. But if I'm being honest, there are moments where I've gone to God and said, what is this, God? I don't understand. How many of you have ever done that? If you haven't, you can continue to put no. But if you have, then put yes. I say that because I want you to see that it's okay, that there are other believers that do that, and that is so typical. Okay? Yeah. We tried to remain faithful, but we had to leave. That is okay too. Okay? And it is okay for you to say no. Like, I trust in the Lord in everything. I don't bring a edited version. I always bring that true version, and I say what I need to say. I'm going to be honest, it sometimes is really hard. It's sometimes hard because we feel like we're being disobedient, or we feel like we're being disrespectful, so we can't really say what we feel like we're feeling. Yeah, sometimes it's bitterness. Yep. All of those things are so vulnerable and true. So thank you guys for doing that. Welcome if you are new. I want to tell you good morning. If you are new to this Bible study and this is the first time you've ever been here, I want to welcome you. Can you guys put that in the comments? I do these Bible studies every single weekday, so Monday through Friday, and I go live at 9 a.m. Central, and I go verse by verse through Scripture. I don't sugarcoat it. I just go through the actual text, what it means in our life, and what we're actually in right now. And if you are here day in and day out, you're one of my consistent ones, the ones that show up. You don't have to be here every day. But good morning. Okay? We're staying in Exodus 5 today because today is a shorter live. I'm not going live for the full 2 hours. I have a hard stop at 10. As you guys know, I'm going to my son's picnic at his school today. And so I'm doing that and leaving right at 10. But I did want to dive deeper because yesterday was also a shorter one because we had our prayer call. You had a confirmation last night on my story. Tell me about that. Tell me about that. I want to know more. Okay, I'm very curious about that. I love that. I love when he speaks to us. Were you also on the prayer call yesterday? If you were, I feel like that's even more of my study. Okay, on my study. Tell me about that. I want to know the confirmation. So we're going to start this Bible study in prayer here in just a second. We always start it, and I ask you guys to bring what you were praying to God for. Just put it here in the chat. We're going to get started by opening up in prayer, and good morning to those of you that are just joining in. We're going to open up in prayer here in just a second. We're going to do a recap of what we talked about yesterday and dive even deeper into Exodus 5. Good morning, Carolyn. Good morning, Aunt Tina and Tori. Yeah, it can just be one word. Or you can go as in-depth as you'd like to. That's totally up to you, but we know that God knows all the details of it. Healing. Good morning. Good morning to every one of you. Job, health. Yeah. All right. Marriage and peace. Alicia or Alicia, however you say your name. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Mariah. All right, you all. We're going to get started here in prayer, and then we're going to start the recap. Okay, so stay on. Please continue to flood the comments with your prayers. I know that we have such a beautiful community that we all pray over one another. So just keep them coming. If you are just joining, keep your prayers coming in. We're gonna start off our Bible study in prayer and do a recap. So if you are just joining, you are right on time. Okay, we have not fully started. All right. All right, you guys. Heavenly Father, I thank you for the opportunity for us to gather in this live this morning. I pray for peace and calmness over the hearts of every single person on this live. I pray that we settle in and listen to the word that you've given us today. Father, please give me the wisdom and discernment to represent it accurately. If there is anything that I miss, Father, or that misrepresents you, please ensure that someone calls it out, or please give me the wisdom. Father, I pray that everyone that is on this live, whether they are here currently or watching the replay, that the things that they're struggling with, Father, that you are there with them, as your word says, as we have experienced. I pray that there is a peace that surpasses all understanding in the difficulties that we go through, and a knowledge that you are right there with us, walking us through it, because that version that's going to come out on the other side of it is something that we had to go through in order to be what you're calling us to be. We know that your plans are plans for good, and we cannot even begin to know the plans that you have for us, but we know that you are with us, and your plans are to bless us abundantly and exceedingly. So we thank you for all the times, be it good or amazing. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen. All right. Thank you all. All right. So I'm going to do a recap of part 1. If you are just coming in, you are right on time. So today yesterday we covered Exodus 5, and I'm doing this in 2 parts. Okay. Normally my studies are about 2 hours, but yesterday and today were just a little over an hour. And so I was like, why don't I just break them up? We finished all of Exodus 5, and that is totally fine. And if you guys want to get the replays, on the bottom left hand of your screen, there's a gold icon. And in it, I have 2 things for you. One, if you want the replays, you just DM me and say replay, and my system will send you the link for it. Or if you guys are new, can you put that in the comments? Because I have a gift for you. In that same place, you'll see another little tab that says new viewer live, thank you. That is a gift for you. It's 44 questions when you guys are going through times where you're facing tough decisions. And I want to send that to you so you guys have it. Fun fact, for those of you guys that already have it, I forget to say this, but in there it's like a Canva link, and it allows you to save these verses or these questions that you have, the mind reframing. I don't know what to call them, but you can save them as a wallpaper background on your phone so that you can see them time and time again. So I haven't told any of you guys that. I think it's in the guide, but if any of you didn't know that, there's that there too. So yesterday we were in Exodus 5, covered the whole thing, and essentially Moses and Aaron, they go to Pharaoh with God's message, and they say, let my people go. And so Pharaoh's response is very immediate and complete. He says, who is the Lord? Who is this Lord that I should obey his voice? I don't know that Lord, and I'm not going to let Israel go. So when we went deeper into that word, we looked at the Hebrew element of it, and that word was yada. So we know that Pharaoh is not confused, even though to most that may sound like, oh, who is this person that you're calling a God? We know that he is not confused about who God is. What he was doing in that moment is he was actually refusing the covenant. He was refusing the relationship with God. That was actually a declaration. It wasn't a question. And that's because we know that Pharaoh at that time believed he was a God, and he was not about to put another God above him, right? So that's a declaration. So he gets upset, right? Because Moses comes to him and is asking not to let his people go indefinitely. He just asked for 3 days. He just wanted 3 days that the Israelites could go and worship in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said no, like he didn't want them worshiping another God because he didn't want another God above him. So then what happens is Pharaoh is upset, and he removes the straw from the brick making, and he keeps that quota the same. He doesn't give them a harder assignment. He gives them one that's essentially impossible. All right. So we looked at what the word straw meant in this, well, there's a word stubble. So essentially, he used stubble and he made it almost impossible for them, because what would happen is the bricks wouldn't stay formed. Essentially, they would just crumble. And so the word straw actually appears 14 times in 11 verses, and that is because the text is making you feel the accumulation the same way that Israel was feeling it. Okay, so the Israelite foremans, they ended up getting hurt, right? They were beaten when that quota falls short. So essentially it made it to where that was just what was going to happen. It was almost unavoidable. And Pharaoh knew that, right? And they appealed to Pharaoh and said, please don't, and he dismisses them. And then they walk out of the court and they find Aaron and Moses waiting outside, and the Israelites turn on them. Because prior to that, they had worshipped, or they had, Moses and Aaron had come to them and told them God's plan, and they believed it, and they worshipped. And now, because it didn't go according to the way that they thought it would, what on paper looked like the opposite of what they wanted, like it actually was, but on paper it looked like what just happened that was contradictory to what God said would happen. That's what they thought. But we have to remember that they didn't get that burning bush like Moses did. They didn't get the account, but they believed and they worshiped at the end of chapter 4. And now they're in a harder situation and they have no confirmation that what they believed is real. Okay, so then we went into Psalm 139 and we looked at verses 7 through 12. And it says, where can I go from your spirit? If I make my bed in the depths, there you are. Even the darkness is not dark to you. God is not absent from the silence. He is present in that chapter that doesn't make any sense yet. All right? So we ended knowing that we are not hidden from him by a hard chapter, but we're held by him inside of that. How many of you guys are familiar with Psalm 139, especially verses 7 through 12? I read that, and that is just, it's one of my favorites. I love the entire book of Psalms. Psalms is just, I can't wait till we get there, because to me, Psalms is like this, David just knows exactly how we are as humans, because he's human, of course, but he just knows how to relate the things that we're experiencing internally and do it so beautifully, poetically. And so I love Psalms 139. If you guys are not familiar with it, I would encourage you to read it. I just quoted the verses 7 through 12, but go back in and do that. That's where we left yesterday, and we're picking up right here. So if you guys are just joining in, I saw several of you guys coming in. I want to welcome you in. We're just getting started. We are in Exodus 5. We read the whole thing yesterday. However, I'm diving deeper into it. So if any of you want that replay, if you go to the left side of your screen, there's a gold icon and a DM message option. If you DM me, you click the one that says replay, I'm going to send you all the recaps. Okay? And if you are new here, I welcome you. Can you put that in the chat? I know we have so many people that come in and day out, but we want to welcome you. I want to welcome you. Okay? So that's where we left off. You guys are right on time. You are not late. So I want to start immediately with a psychological piece of it. You guys that know me know that I love putting neuroscience into it. And I want to start with the psychological layer of this. Okay? I want to talk about what the silence actually does to us psychologically. And we'll bring it back into the text. Okay? So before we go back into the text, I want to name something that happens when we have this sort of prolonged silence after we've taken a significant step of obedience. And I do that because this layer actually explains why we stopped bringing that real version of us to God. So at the beginning of the live, if some of you missed it, one of the things that I asked you, and you guys can answer here now too, but we're in Exodus 5. I read the full chapter, but we're diving deeper into it. So right now I'm talking about the psychological layer. So what I had asked you guys at the beginning of the live is, do you ever bring like an edited version of yourself to God? Like you have, I'll explain it a little bit more in depth before you guys answer. So more specifically, you have taken a step of obedience. You felt like God called you into something, and you took that step, probably after you spent all this time, like Moses, talking yourself out of the reasons why you were qualified for it, right? You're too old, you're too far behind, you don't have enough resources, you don't have enough finances, you're not as good as the other person does, you name it, right? All of these reasons, and God still said, no, you are the one. And you took that level of obedience to the next step, and you did it. You walked in it, and immediately it didn't match what you thought it would. And so you remained faithful, but in it you were like, you didn't bring this version of yourself to prayer where you were asking God why. Like you didn't start questioning him, but you felt that internally. Or maybe you were bitter, or maybe you were angry at him, or saddened, whatever that emotion was. Have you guys ever done that? So what you do is you start editing your prayers. God wants that full version of you, right? But sometimes we do that. So that's a question that I had asked you guys. And so now as we go into it, I want to talk about why it feels like silence and what it does to us. Because that layer explains why we stopped bringing this full version of ourselves to God. That real version of ourselves. Because it's not a flaw in our character. So you don't have to feel like a horrible person if you start to do that, because it's a very predictable human response to something like a very specific kind of vulnerability, because we just did something very vulnerable by stepping into that place. So when somebody makes a significant decision that is tied to our identity and our calling, one that actually requires real courage and real faith to take that step, and then silence comes, the waiting that follows, it does something very specific to the way we show up in prayer. Okay, so we already came into this kind of holding on to this question about ourselves. Like we wondered somewhere underneath that, like immediately after we said yes, we wondered, am I actually the right person for this? Whatever our excuse was, or whether we heard God clearly, or whether we were qualified for the thing that we just said yes to. So that question was already there before we stepped into obedience, and we moved anyway. Good morning. Good morning to all of you guys coming in. The silence after we moved, it didn't answer that question, right? We're like, why? I'm not all of these things. I'm not qualified. So now, God, you've gone silent, and I don't understand why, because that does not answer the question. It just left it open. So an open question about your own qualification now is sitting in a silence that's not giving you anything to close it with, starts to already feel like the answer. That's not because it actually is the answer, but it's because what our minds do. Like our human minds do this thing. We start to believe that, and our minds actually don't do well with an unresolved uncertainty, especially about something that matters. And so what we do is we start to generate an answer from whatever is available, and what's available is the silence. And the harder the conditions are, and the people that are around us who are not confirming that we got it right, our mind starts to take all of that and we start building a case for it. So then when we go to pray, we're carrying that case, okay, that case that we just built up, and we don't oftentimes say that out loud when we bring it to God. That feels like, I'm not going to do that. The stakes are too high. I don't want him to be upset at me, or whatever that looks like, right? We are already in a vulnerable place. We're already between confirmation and nothing being confirmed. The one relationship that we're counting on most to hold us in it is God. So we can't afford to emotionally, risk that relationship with him. We also can't afford to risk bringing that real version to it. And we don't want to feel like, ooh, I don't want to disrespect God, or I just can't be this vulnerable person. Like, I oftentimes feel like the reason why I do it is because I can't even trust my own mind. So am I even thinking the right thing? So I'm not even going to bring that to you, God, because it probably isn't even real. Okay, so I manage it. Like, we tend to manage it. And then we show up with this version that sounds more like faith. Thank you, God. Thank you for waking me up today. We start talking about all the things that we're grateful for. Because that version, I think, is easier to say, and it doesn't require us to admit that we are confused or upset, or that we have been in this long enough that we have started to wonder if the whole thing is real. How many of you have felt that? You can be vulnerable. I have felt that time and time and time again, more times than I would like to admit. I try to manage it, and I feel like managing and editing it, that's the very thing that keeps us from being met. You know why? Because God wants what's real. He doesn't want a presentation. He wants the person that's underneath it. So I want to know. Put one thing in the comments, you guys. One word for what you have been editing out of what you've been bringing to God. Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it shame? Is it condemnation? Is it whatever it is? And be honest about it. You want to know why? Because God already knows. He already knows. It doesn't surprise him when you come to him with it. He already knows these things. There have been times where I was just like, God, I am just mad. I am sorry, but I am mad. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I'm mad right now. Because the thing that you've called me to do, I've been working at it for years, and it doesn't match what I think it should be. So please forgive me, but I am upset. I have done that. And I felt confusion. I felt all those things that you guys have felt, the shame, the insecurity, all of those things. And you know what God did? That I can speak from personal experience. He leaned in closer. And he said, like he tended to everything that I needed. And he said, okay, I'm going to show up and confirm to you in a different way. And I think it's because, not only because of the fact that he wants that real version of us, but what does it say? Ask and you shall receive. Right? In accordance to his will, but ask and you shall receive. His goal is we do not serve a God of confusion, right? He's not there to confuse you. We do not serve a God that abandons us. Right? He is present with us time and time and time again. So when we got to Exodus, I want to read from Exodus 5:22. Okay? And if you guys are just coming in, we are in Exodus 5, verse 22. We have gone through the whole chapter. So if you guys need a replay, the little gold icon at the bottom of the page, that's available for you for the replay of yesterday's. We are diving even deeper into this. Talking about the psychological, all of the things. Okay, we're going there today. So in chapter 5, verse 22, it says, why am I thinking? Oh yeah, wait, no, where is it at? Oh, I was like, there's no verse 22. What am I talking about? But there is. It just looks like chapter 6 in my book. It says, so Moses returned to the Lord and said, Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Why is it you have sent me? And verse 23 says, for since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to these people. Neither have you delivered your people at all. He's like calling God out in this moment. He says, for since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to these people, and you have not delivered your people at all. Okay? Why have you done evil to this people? Why did you ever even send me? You haven't even delivered your people at all. That's bold, right? That's calling God out. And you know what? In all honesty, it makes sense, right? We have seen that happen in Scripture. God, you said, Abraham said that to God after God made the covenant. God, you said that you would make me a great nation, but how is this to be? I've been waiting, but I also don't have a son. And what does God do? He answers, right? Moses calls him out, and what does God do? I'm going to read a little bit of chapter 6 so you guys get a preview. And it says, "Then the Lord said to Moses," he answered. He answers immediately. And I want to tell you guys something too. I guarantee you that God is not silent in the way that you envision it. In the way that we're experiencing it, he's not, because he's there with us in everything. He is a loving, intentional God that is with us in the mount, at the top of the mountain and in the valleys. But I feel like what happens most of the time is that it's either A, not the answer that we think it should be, or B, we're not listening enough. If we ever feel like God is silent, he's not there. One time, or he's not there. He's there. He's always there. But one time I heard this thing that said, when someone's standing right next to you, do they shout? No, they don't. And what do we know about God's voice, right? He speaks to us in a calm, still voice. So I feel like Moses in this what we just spoke about in verses 22 through 23, he's not writing a prayer request. He's not reaching for this version of himself that sounds like a man or the man he was when he was standing at the burning bush. He's not performing in a confidence that he doesn't have. He's actually bringing an accusation to God. He's saying, I did what you told me to do, and you haven't done what you said you were going to do. And so he brings it directly to God. I've done that. I've done that. Have any of you guys done that? Please help me feel not alone. I have done that. And I felt guilty afterwards because I was like, I know, I'm just angry right now. But Moses did that. And so he just brings it directly to God. He doesn't bring it to Aaron. You know what this reminds me of? Is he brings it to the one who has the control over it, not to some other family member to talk nonsense about God and say, you know what? Like I bring it to my husband all the time. Like, I'm so confused. I don't understand. But yet I'm not doing that with God. I'll bring it to somebody else, when I really should be bringing it to him. Yeah. You speak to the Lord plainly and you always end up repenting. Do you end up repenting because you're like, whoops, I shouldn't have done that, and you feel guilty, which I'm sure that's an element of it? Or do you do that because he shows himself? Like he shows you, like, you probably could have just waited. I love that he just brings it directly to God. He doesn't do it to Aaron. He doesn't do it to himself in the dark where he's just alone and is only internalizing it. He doesn't soften it into something that feels like a more acceptable version before it leaves his mouth. He turns to the Lord and he says the exact thing that is actually true about what he's feeling in that moment. Here's what I want you to see about that, though. Moses is not a man who arrived at this moment with a very strong track record of confidence. Okay, this is a man who just spent 2 full chapters telling God that he was the wrong person. He came up with 5 objections. On the 5th one, God got angry with him, right? Because in the 5th one, that last one was a judgment on God, like on his character. He said, I'm not qualified. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not the right choice. And you know what God did? He answered every objection and he sent him anyway. So now Moses is standing outside of Pharaoh's court with nothing confirmed. And then people are blaming him and the silence is still going. For those of you that are not familiar, what's just happening, the very first thing that Moses goes to do is the very first objection that God gave him. He said, what if the people don't believe me? God answered that because the people ended up believing him, but now it contradicts what just happened because now the people are mad at him. So the question that he was already carrying before he moved about whether he was actually the right person for this, that question actually doesn't feel hypothetical anymore. It feels confirmed. It says, why did you ever even send me? That wasn't just a question about the mission. It was a question underneath the mission. Like, was I actually the right person? Did I actually hear you? Or did I mishear the entire thing? And so he brings that question with a full, unedited, with the weight of all of that. And he brings that directly to God. And I want you to see what God does next. He does not correct him. He does not tell him, no, Moses, I got it wrong. Or no, Moses, like, you are the right person. Like, he doesn't correct him. He also doesn't withdraw the commission that he put on Moses, which means that God doesn't respond with disappointment, or he doesn't ask Moses to adjust the tone before he engages. He doesn't say, do you know who you're speaking to? He doesn't do any of that. I do that with my own kids. If they ever come to me in a certain type of way, I mean, they're 3 and 7, so like, there's that. But I mean, I'm sure we've all done that with our kids or with certain people, more than likely our kids. But I'm like, do you remember who, like, adjust your voice, please, like tone. God doesn't do that to him in this moment. He just answers him, which is like, I should model that as a parent, right? If God our Father, the Creator, doesn't even come. I mean, yes, he does. He does correct Moses. He does get angry with him. But when he comes to him with an accusation, he doesn't get upset with him. He just answers him. And we see that in chapter 6, verse 1. He says, and the Lord said to Moses, then, after the lament, after the accusation, after this full unedited version of what Moses was carrying landed in God's presence, then God spoke. I just have to pause there. Do you guys see the weight of that? He was waiting for that version because God had not spoken. God had gone silent, quote unquote. And then when does he speak again? When Moses brings that real version. Yep. And he said it with love. He says it with love. So I want to tap deeper into why we stop saying that the real thing that we're trying to present to God. Okay? We're doing a lot of neuroscience today. And the reason being is because this is one of the biggest blocks. It's one of the biggest blocks we face. If we want a deep relationship with someone, we can't fake it. Okay? But I also want you to see why we do it. So, what happens when we start editing what we're bringing to God? There's something deeper in this. And I want to name it carefully because I think it's easy to hear this as a rebuke, and it's not one. So I want you to keep that in mind too. So when the silence goes on long enough and the conditions around us aren't confirming the word that we received, and we're already carrying this question of whether we are the right person for this, something shifts in how we relate to God in prayer. And we start telling him the way that we relate to the relationship in our life, where we start to relate to God in a way that it doesn't feel secure, where we're not sure that we're going to be received in a certain way. If if we share this vulnerable side of us. So we begin to manage it, and we begin to like fix our posture, like our heart posture before God, because the cost of not being received by him is higher than the cost of not being fully known. And we don't do it consciously. We don't decide most of the time to be inauthentic with God. We're doing what a person does when we're in a vulnerable enough place that we can't afford another closed door. That's the last thing we want, right? Last thing we want is for God to look to us and say, "Depart from me, for I never knew you," right? Like, that's the scariest thing. God feels like that last closed door. Like, we can't afford to not be in relationship with God because that's the most meaningful relationship to us. So we show up with a version that's most likely to be welcomed by him. And so it makes it sound more like faith than what it actually feels like right now. And I want to say the tragic thing about that pattern is that's the exact opposite of what we need. We don't need to be the version of prayer. Like, we don't need this version of prayer to manage a sort of presentation before we bring it to God. We need that real version that brings that real relationship and trust. Because the relationship with God, he's strong enough to hold it, right? He's strong enough to hold any of the emotions that we feel. Moses proved that to us at the end of Exodus 5. The relationship held even with the accusation that he made to God, and God did not flinch. God just answered. But we have to trust that God is actually going to receive it in that way before we bring it to him. And trusting that when we have had a silence that has been longer than what we imagined it would be, we begin to doubt ourselves. Okay, we've already begun to doubt ourselves. And the thing that Exodus 5 is showing us, a lot of times that's the thing that God is asking us to do, to bring that real vulnerable version of ourselves to him. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. So I want to welcome you guys in. I saw several of you coming in this morning. Good morning. You guys can come in. We're in Exodus 5. We're finishing out this chapter today. And if you guys want any of the replays, on the bottom left hand, there's a gold icon. You can catch the replays for this and for yesterday's to get you up to speed. Okay, I'm going to get a drink, and then I'm going to talk about Psalm 123. Okay. You guys asked what the music was. It's called 3 Hours of Soaking in His Presence. That's what this is titled. It's on Spotify. Okay, so good morning as you guys are coming in. If you are new, can you guys say good morning? I just want to welcome you in. Our community is so beautiful, and we love welcoming you in as well. But I also have a gift for you. In that same gold icon at the bottom left hand of your screen, there's a gift, and it says, "New live viewer welcome." Make sure you guys get that, along with the replays. Oh, you guys are so awesome. Good morning. I'm glad you guys are all saying good morning. Like, literally, they just all came in at once. Good morning. I'm glad you love this Bible study. I love spending my mornings with you. All right, we have about 15 more minutes, okay? I normally go live for about 2 hours, but I'm hopping off to go have lunch, a picnic with my son at his school, okay? But we're going to get through this today because I want to close out Exodus 5. We're going to look at Psalm 123 and what lament actually is. And so I want to take you to Psalm 123 in relation to what we're talking about in Exodus 5. The reason why I want to do that is because, to me, Psalm 123, I have to tell you something really quick too. I had not even originally planned to put Psalm 123 into the Bible study of what we're talking about today. But yesterday, I was just scrolling through TikTok, and the first thing that came up was Psalm 123. And so I listened, and what she said was so beautiful, and it spoke so perfectly to what we were discussing, that I said, you know what? Anytime that happens, it is not by coincidence. And I said, okay, Father, I'm going to include it in. And so I did, right? And it spoke so deeply to me. It was beautiful. I was like, I love Psalm 23 because it just encompassed every element of what I was feeling in that moment, but it was so relevant to what we were talking about today. And I know that is never by chance. It is so beautiful as he speaks to me. Like, I can't with him sometimes because it's just like, you know exactly what I need to hear. And there's no disputing that that was you, Father. So Psalm 23 to me does something for the through line of this chapter that I don't want you guys to miss. So in Psalm 123, I know I've read it. I read it yesterday, I read it earlier, and I'm going to recap some of it. But Psalm 123 is a psalm of ascent. Okay, so that means that it is one of the psalms that was sung by pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem to worship. So they sang it on the journey, not after they arrived. They did it on the journey. They didn't even do it after things were fully resolved. They did it on the way. Now, if you know anything about Psalm 123, especially about the verses that I read to you, it reads as a beautiful psalm, but underneath it there's anger. David is angry with God. On this, what I just told you, they did it mid-journey, mid-burden, in motion towards God before their situation had changed. So I want to read it with you guys today. I'm just going to read it from my screen. I'm not going to go to it in the Bible, but you guys can. Okay? It says, I lift up my eyes to you who sit enthroned in heaven. As the eyes of slaves look to the hand of their master, as the eyes of a female slave look to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God, till he shows us his mercy. Have mercy on us, Lord. Have mercy on us, for we have endured no end of contempt. We have endured no end of ridicule from the arrogant, of contempt from the proud. That is not cleaned up language. That is a people telling God exactly what they have been under and then exactly how long they have been under it. That is another accusation. It's essentially an accusation. There is no end of contempt. There is no end of ridicule. So they're not softening it when they bring it to God. They're not arriving at God's presence and saying, okay, wait, I have something on my heart, but I need to be respectful. The thing that I love about David in Psalms is I always feel like, man, that's probably how I should have spoke to God. He always sounds so respectful when he brings something to the Lord. But also, he's not cleaning it up. He's not cleaning it up to sound more resolved than what it actually is. He's bringing the full weight of it to God. You know what this reminds me of? In John, when Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. In order for us to come to him and for him to give us rest, we have to bring that full version of ourselves to him fully. We can't leave a part of it to hold on to and then just bring some of it to God. We have to bring the whole thing to him. So the thing that I want you guys to see is that when we bring that full version to God, that is not a detour from worship. In Psalm 123, it's showing us that that's the content of worship. That is worshiping. I know a lot of times we think worship is in church and us singing or us in our cars jamming out to worship music. That's one element of it. But in order to fully worship him, to me, it's an act of full surrender to say, God, this is bigger than what I can hold on to. This thought that I have in my mind, it's causing a divide in our relationship. It's making me question your goodness, Father. I have to bring that to you. Please answer that for me because I don't want anything to come between us. Please resolve that because I know what your character and your nature is. And for some reason, In my limited capacity, I can't begin to understand why it doesn't match. Tell me. I put my full trust in you, Father. Tell me why. Or help me to understand. That's what I feel like is happening in that moment. What do you guys think it is? Why do you think it is so important for us to bring that as a form of worship as well? Because what they're doing, they're bringing contempt as this honest offering of a people who are still looking for God in the middle of it. And you know what they're doing? They're still lifting their eyes. They're still saying, you're the one that's enthroned. They're still trusting that mercy is the thing that he has to give. They're trusting in his character. It's almost like a reminder to themselves. I don't understand what's going on, God, but this is what I know of you. That's what Moses did at the end of Exodus 5. He didn't walk away from God when he had an accusation to bring. He turned to God with it. I would want that. How many of you, if somebody had an issue with you, you wouldn't want them to go and talk to 5 other people or hold on to it. You'd want them to bring it to you directly. So why wouldn't God want that? And we would want them to say what was actually on their hearts. Because if it meant that it was going to cause a divide in our relationship, then I want the full weight of it. If any of you guys know me outside of this live, you just know me in my day-to-day, you know that that's how I am too. And it sounds like tough love, but I bring it because there's nothing more important than showing up as that real version of myself to you. So if I can do it to other people, why wouldn't I do it to God? And I don't want to carry this burden, this feeling of questioning the Lord when I know that that is in direct contradiction to who he is. So I want to know the real thing that you all have been carrying that you haven't brought to God is what? Can you put that in the comments for me? What is that? And we can be vulnerable here. I am so vulnerable with you guys. I question it. I'm like, should you have said that, Vanessa? But I want to know what that is. What is the thing that you're not laying at his feet yet? Fear, shame, doubt, questioning. Okay. Here's what I want you to notice as you guys put that in there. I want you to notice something about the way Moses frames his lament at the end of Exodus 5. So he doesn't say, I think I may have misheard you, God. He doesn't say, I'm struggling to trust the process. He also doesn't say, well, I know you've had a plan, God, and I'm just having a hard time seeing it right now. He says, why have you done evil to these people? Why did you even send me? You haven't delivered your people at all. He brings the full force of his confusion and disappointment and his exhaustion, and he names it exactly as what it is. He doesn't put it, like he doesn't mask it or dress it up in theological language so that it's easier to receive. We could talk to God in gibberish and he's going to know what we're saying, okay? He says the thing that's actually true about what he's experiencing, and he says it directly to God, to the one who can take care of it. And I want to name something for those of us in this room, especially the ones that are putting stuff in the comments, but also for those of you that are watching that didn't put anything. Because I know we all have something. That have been carrying this question of whether we're actually qualified for what we said yes to, whether that's in business or in our lives. Okay, Moses's lament in that moment is not the prayer of a man who lost faith. It's actually a prayer of a man who still believes that God is the one who is worth bringing it to. If Moses had lost faith in that moment, he wouldn't be bringing it to God. You don't bring an accusation to someone that you have already written off. You bring it to the relationship that you still believe in. And you bring it to the one who you still believe has the capacity to even answer it. So the fact that those of us feel like we still have something to say to God about the silent, the fact that we are still upset, or the fact that we haven't gone fully quiet, that is not a sign of us losing our faith. That is a sign that the relationship is still alive. You know, I have to say this too. A lot of times we see people who are angry with God, who question God and say, God, how could you X, Y, Z? Why did you do this to me? You know what I see in that? That is a person that is not so far removed from him and they lack faith. When you care about something, whether it is anger, anger or love or confusion or anything, any emotion, that shows me that there's still a chance because you believe. And if you had the opportunity to ask him, he would, right? Like if you had an opportunity to get an answer right then and there, you believe that he would answer you. So to me, that tells me there's still a chance. And the silence didn't end our faith. It's still there. And we're still here. And that is evidence to me enough. So I want to talk about what God does with that real version. Okay, that real version we bring to him. So in Exodus chapter 6, verse 1, I want to show you how God responds to the lament, because I feel like this part, it changes every single thing about how we understand about what we've been holding back, right? So I told you, it says, then the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand he will let them go, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land. Okay. Then the Lord said to Moses, after the accusation, after he said, why did you ever send me? After he laid the full weight of it at God's feet, and it landed in God's presence, then God spoke. So he didn't ask Moses to reframe the question and say, bring that back. He didn't wait for Moses' tone to improve. He didn't even respond with disappointment, like, Moses, why do you still not believe me? He doesn't even correct him or remind him. He doesn't say, you should just trust in me, right? He already told him, I am who I am, right? He told him that already. He doesn't remind him of that. He received the lament exactly as it was, and he responded from his own character. He answered with a move of himself, this fuller revelation of who he is and what he was about to do. That is what God does with that real version. He meets it. He doesn't meet the presentation. He doesn't meet that edited version. Yes, he can, but what he wants from you is that all of you. He wants every bit of you. And you know what, you guys? He already knows. He just wants you to say it. He wants you to get to the end of you. And then he answers from a place that is so far beyond what Moses was asking that Moses couldn't even have constructed the answer. Moses was asking why, but what God did is he answered with what came next. And so we've been showing up with this edited version because we're not sure what God would do with that real version, with the real one. Moses just showed you what God does with it. He receives it and he answers it. And he answers it not with a correction, but with an encounter. He leans in. So that silence, after we have walked in obedience, and it felt like confirmation about what we suspected about ourselves before we went in it, that's the thing that I want to talk about before we close. Because to me, that's the most important thing that this live that you've been on has been building towards. Some of you have come into this with a question. Moses came in with all the questions, right? Like he had so many. He had 5. There was 2 full chapters of him telling God why he was not qualified. He wasn't a good speaker. He wasn't the right choice. And God answered every single objection, and he sent him anyway. And then silence came, and that silence didn't feel like what Moses wanted to feel, right? It didn't feel neutral, because it never does when we're carrying a question about whether we are the right person. The silence felt like a question that was getting louder. And then the conditions felt like that was supporting evidence, that the moment that God confirmed or that it didn't go the way that we expected it to go, that felt like confirmation. And the people around them telling Moses, well, we don't believe you anymore, right? That felt like an additional confirmation. Like, you know what? I was right. I was right in my original thought. But here's what I need you to see. The silence wasn't God building a case against you. Silence was a chapter. And it was a very specific chapter with a very specific purpose inside of a story that God was already writing. Moses didn't know what he didn't know what was going to happen in Exodus 6, right? He didn't know what was going to happen immediately following. He didn't know that God was going to say he didn't know what he was going to say when he was standing outside of Pharaoh's court feeling like the wrong person for the job. He just had that moment today. He just had the weight of what he was feeling, of what his obedience had produced so far. That's all he could see. And then he had a question in his mind that he didn't have an answer for. He wanted to close it. But God was already in chapter 6. He was already like 5 steps ahead of Moses. He was already there before Moses even finished asking the question. He already knew what Moses was carrying. He knew the question that Moses had been carrying since the burning bush, and he commissioned him anyway. When they were walking on the journey, he already knew the question that Moses hadn't even asked, and he answered that. And now he stands before God again, and God is answering a question that he hasn't even fully finished. And it's not because Moses had answered the question, but because God already had. And so what that tells me is it doesn't disqualify you in the silence. He didn't disqualify you just because he went quiet. He didn't change your mind about you in the silence. The silence is part of that chapter. You're just in the in-between phase. Okay? And that is because God is already in chapter 6. He already went ahead of you and made a way. And he is silent because he needs you to get to that next chapter, because he's going to answer it in that next chapter. But he is with you even in that moment, in the questioning, in the doubt, in the confusion. We see a God who was already in that next chapter before Moses even finished his lament. And he's in it before you even finish yours. So what that tells me is that you can bring him that real version because he's already there. He already knows. Okay? So if this morning was something that you guys needed, and you have been holding on to this version of yourself that you haven't said out loud yet, I want to tell you about something that we're doing tomorrow on this live. Normally we do it today, but I have to leave. I built it exactly for this. It was modeled on this. It's called Hearing God Through the Noise. It's just part of our lives. I do it every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Tomorrow, we will recap days 1 and 2. We'll do them together. Normally we don't do it that way, but that's how we're doing it, so that we don't skip the whole thing entirely. But I'm going to give you day 1 today, so you can watch the replay of it and come tomorrow to the live. So if you go to that gold icon at the bottom left hand of your screen, there is an option that says Hearing God Through the Noise 3-day challenge. If you click on that, it will send you an email with everything you need along with the replays. And if you miss tomorrow or day 3 on Friday, that is okay. Each day we'll send you the replays. All right? We go around 10:30-ish tomorrow. That's when that portion of it starts on the live. Okay? So if you want that, please go. Get your free gift. If any of you want the replays, all of that is in that little gold icon on the bottom left of your screen. All right? But it's for those of you that you've wanted to hear God speak, and you want to silence the noise that you feel right before you're called into something. It's not a devotional. It's not another thing to manage. It's just this experience. I actually do it with the women in my paid community, in my business coaching with them, because it is the number one thing I see as we are starting to walk in obedience, noise starts to come in, and we start giving objections just like Moses did for all of the reasons why we're not qualified for it, and how to move through it and walk in obedience. Okay? So go get that if you guys want to be a part of that. But I asked you guys something in the beginning of this live, and I want to know. I want to know if you've been showing up to God with this edited version of yourself, the one that sounds like it's more faithful than what it actually is. A lot of you said no. I think, and when I reframed the question, a lot of you said yes. But you can still answer that. We're going to close out in prayer as well. So I want to know, are you showing up as that version? Or were you prior to this study? And then I want to know what you're praying to God to move for, because we're going to close in prayer here in just a second. But you typed that before we looked into what Moses brought to God at the end of Exodus 5. Before we saw that same man who God chose, that same man who we spent the last 2 chapters telling God that he wasn't qualified, and he brought his full unedited accusation directly to the Lord. Why have you done evil to these people? Why did you ever send me? Why have you not delivered, or you haven't delivered your people at all? That was before we read Psalm 123, and we saw that bringing the real thing to God mid-journey, mid-contempt, mid-waiting, that wasn't a detour from our faith. That's what faith actually looks like when the chapter is hard and we're still showing up anyway. That was before we saw that God's response to Moses' unedited lament wasn't correction. It was an encounter. Then the Lord said, right? Then the Lord said to Moses. That came after the accusation, after Moses brought that full, real version to him. Then God spoke. So those of you that put your why in the comments, your yes, that's me, that isn't a problem with your faith. That means that your yes means that you have been in something real so long that the polished version that you had, it ran out. And the polished version that's running out, that's not a sign of your faith failing. You're just human, and you have been in it so long that you can't even maintain a presentation to God anymore. You don't have to, though, because God meets what's real. He met Moses in accusation, and he met the pilgrim's contempt in Psalm 123. He's going to meet you in whatever you've been editing before you brought it to him. Bring him the real version. Can you guys put that in the comments? I'm going to bring him the real version. That's our declaration for today. I will bring my real version. However you guys want to say it. I don't care how you type it. It's kind of long. I'm going to bring him the real version. That's a reminder to you guys today. You're going to bring him the real version. And that is because the relationship with him can hold it. Because he already knew it was there. Okay? All right. I'm going to go into prayer and we're going to close out. Okay. Heavenly Father, I thank you for the opportunity for us to gather today. I thank you for allowing us the opportunity to hear your word. I pray that it brings a comfort to every single person on this live and on the replay, knowing that we don't have to fake the emotion when we bring it to you, Father, that we can show up as we are, that there is nothing too big for you, Father, that you know every bit of our hearts, that you know everything that we are carrying, and that we can lay it at your feet, because you are the one who is in control. You have already gone before us and made a way, and I thank you for that, Father. I pray for every single comment as it comes in. You know every detail of it, Father. I pray for comfort. I pray for peace, clarity, and more relationship with you, Father. Restoration of marriages and families. For health, both physical and mental. Every single thing that we are going through, Father, we know that we can lay it at your feet, that you are Jehovah Rapha. Okay. We thank you for everything you do, Father. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen. All right, everybody. So, tomorrow, we are going to be going through days 1 and 2 of our Hearing God Through the Noise Challenge. If you want that, please go to the little gold icon at the bottom of the screen. Hit that. You can get your replays. If I pop off and you didn't get an opportunity to do that, do me a favor. Message me, but just say day 1. That's it. Just say day 1. Don't add an icon. Don't say please or I would like. Literally just say the words day 1. That is because I have an automated system that will automatically send it to you. And if you put anything in addition to it, you'll still get it, but I have to manually go back in to send it to you. And sometimes it takes me a little while, especially if I have hundreds of you doing that. So it's fine if you do that because it happens all the time. It happens every day. But you have to DM me day 1, just like Sadie did. You just put in day 1, but you have to DM it to me. Because my system doesn't get it on the live. It gets it if you DM me. If you want the replay, you just say replay. That's it. You can even type out, I have both set in there. You can put the number 1 or type out 1. But don't add anything like please or a prayer emoji or anything like that. Just put it just like that. Just short and sweet. If you want the Kingdom Mandate, that is an option as well. The Kingdom Mandate is my testimony, especially for those of you as faith-driven female entrepreneurs. I want to show you what I believe that God is calling us into. Okay, so that's like a free 30-minute training, and you guys can get that. You just DM me Kingdom Mandate, or you go to the link in my bio, and all of those things are there for you. Either option works, okay? Sending you guys my love and my prayers. And I'm going to pop off, and we're going to be here tomorrow at 9 a.m. Central. It'll be a full study tomorrow, okay? And I will see you guys tomorrow.